So, hello and welcome back yet again. And what a day! We actually have a lot of sunlight, as you can see, because the lighting is probably crazy in here. But it's also really cold. I think it's like maybe 8 degrees Fahrenheit outside. So, it's like one of those lying days where you look outside and you say, I could go outside and go for a walk or go play. And then you step outside and say, oh, that's really cold. Maybe I'll just stay in the house. So I figured it would be a good day to read another couple chapters of Journey to the Center of the Earth, which things are getting good. We are definitely beginning an adventure. And you can tell that we're beginning an adventure because the chapters are kind of getting a little bit longer. They're still nothing compared to some books that I've read where the chapter is like an hour and a half long. But for these older books, these are getting a little bit longer. So that's kind of cool. And our three adventurers are going to be setting sail on a 20 miles under the ground, or however far under the ground they are, ocean. And they're leaving the shore that has a mushroom forest. So we are definitely in the realm of fiction, and that's kind of fun. I'm having a lot of fun with this, and I hope that you are too. So we're going to be jumping back in. Before we jump in, though, hit that thumbs up button. It does always make me smile. I'll probably remind you to do it again later. I don't know. Supposedly it helps the algorithm. If you're not already subscribed, subscribe, because I don't think that subscriber count means as much as it used to, but it's an ego boost. And sometimes we all need that. But with all of that housekeeping-y stuff being said and done, let's jump back into chapter 32 of Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne. On August 13th, we awoke early. We planned to inaugurate a new mode of fast and easy transportation. The rigging on our raft consisted of a mast made from two poles tied together, a yard made of a third, a sail out of our blankets. There was no lack of rope. The entire thing was solid. At 6 o'clock, the professor gave the signal to embark. The food supplies, the baggage, the instruments, the guns, and a good quantity of fresh water gathered from the rocks were all put in their place. Hans had prudently installed a rudder so as to be able to steer his floating vessel, and he took the tiller. I detached the rope that moored us to the shore. The sail was set, and we rapidly left land behind. At the moment of leaving the little harbor, my uncle, who insisted on his geographical nomenclature, wanted to give it a name, proposing mine, among others. Really? I said. I have another proposal. What is your proposal? Grauben. Port Grauben. It'll look really good on the map. Let it be Port Grauben, then. In this way, the memory of my beloved Vierland girl connected with our adventurous expedition. The wind blew from northwest, and we sailed at great speed with the wind from behind. The very dense layers of the atmosphere had considerable force and acted on the sail like a powerful fan. After an hour, my uncle was able to estimate our speed with a great deal of precision. At this rate, he said, we'll travel at least 30 leagues in 24 hours, and we'll soon come in sight of the opposite shore. I made no answer, but went and sat at the front of the raft. The northern shore was already beginning to dip under the horizon. The eastern and western strands spread wide as if to make our departure easier. An immense ocean stretched out in front of my eyes. The gray shadows of great clouds glided over its surface, which seemed to weigh down this somber water. The silvery rays of the electric light, here and there reflected by the spray, shot out little points of light. Soon, we lost sight of land entirely. All points of orientation disappeared, and without the foamy wake of the raft, I would have thought we were perfectly motionless. Around noon, immense algae could be seen floating on the surface of the water. I was aware of the vital power of these plants, which grow at a depth of over 12,000 feet under the sea. I knew that they reproduced under a pressure of 400 atmospheres and sometimes form barriers strong enough to impede the course of a ship, but there were never, at least I don't think, more gigantic algae than those in the Lindenbrock Sea. Our raft passed among fungus that were 3 or 4 thousand feet long, immense serpents that counted beyond the reach of sight, and I entertained myself tracing these endless ribbons, always thinking I had reached the end, and for all the hours of my patience was competing with my surprise. What natural force could produce such plants, and what must the earth have looked like in the first centuries of its formation, when under the impact of heat and humidity, the vegetable kingdom alone had developed? Evening came, and as I had noted on the previous day, the luminosity of the air did not diminish. It was a constant phenomenon whose permanence could be relied upon. So after dinner, I lay at the foot of the mast and immediately fell asleep in the midst of carefree reverie. Hans, motionless at the helm, let the craft run, which, at any rate, didn't even need steering, not with the wind blowing from behind. Since we had departed Port Gräuben, Professor Lindenbrock had charged me with keeping a ship's log, writing down even the smallest observations, recording interesting phenomenon, the direction of the wind, the speed, the route we had taken. In a word, he wanted me to record all the details of this strange sea voyage. I will therefore limit myself here to reproducing these daily notes, written, so to speak, as events directed, so as to give a more exact account of our passage. Friday, August 14th. Steady breeze from the northwest. The raft makes rapid progress in a straight line. The coast is 30 leagues behind us in the direction of the wind. Nothing on the horizon. Light intensity remains the same. Good weather, that is, the clouds are high up and not very dense, and bathed in a white atmosphere that looks like molten silver. Thermometer at plus 32 degrees Celsius. At noon, Hans fastens a hook to the end of a line and baits it with a small piece of meat and throws it into the sea. For 2 hours, nothing. Are these waters uninhabited then? No. A pull on the line. Hans draws it in and lifts up a fish that struggles vigorously. "A fish?" said my uncle. "That's a sturgeon. A small sturgeon," I said. The professor looks carefully at the animal and does not share my opinion. The fish has a flat, round head, and the front of its body is covered with bony plates. Its mouth has no teeth. A large, well-developed pectoral fin is attached to the body without a tail. This animal does belong to the same order where naturalists place the sturgeon, but it's different in many essential aspects. My uncle makes no mistake about this, and after a rather brief examination says, "This fish belongs to a family that has been extinct for centuries, of which only fossil bits are found in the Devonian formations." Well, how could we have taken one of those inhabitants of the primitive oceans alive? The professor replied, "And you can see that these fossil fishes are not at all identical with the contemporaries. So, having one of these creatures alive in one's hand, well, that's quite the joy for a naturalist." "But, uncle," I said, "what family does it belong to?" "Order Granioids, family Cepphalaceae, species—" "Yes?" "Species Pterichthys, I would swear, but this one has a peculiarity which is apparently found in fish that inhabit subterranean waters." "What's that?" "It's blind." "Blind?" "Not just blind. It has no organ for sight at all." I went and looked. It's true, but this could be a special case. So the fish line is baited again and thrown yet again into the ocean. This ocean is most certainly full of fish, for in 2 hours we catch a large quantity of Pterichthys, as well as fish belonging to another extinct family, the Dipterides, whose species my uncle is unable to identify. None of them have any sight organ. This unexpected catch nicely does restock our food supply, though. So it seems certain that this ocean contains only fossil species, among which the fish, as well as the reptiles, are more perfect the more ancient they are in their creation. Perhaps we'll find some of those saurians that science has reconstructed out of bone and cartilage. I take up the telescope and scan the ocean. It's deserted. Undoubtedly, we're still too close to shore. I gaze upward in the air. Why should not some of the birds restored by the immortal Cuvier again flap their wings in these heavy atmospheric layers? The fish would provide them with sufficient food. I survey the whole space, but the air is uninhabited as the shore was. Still, my imagination carries me away into those wonderful specimens of paleontology. Though I'm wide awake, I dream. I think I see enormous chelions on the surface of the water, Antebellian turtles that look like floating islands. Across the dimly lit beach walk the large mammals from the first ages of the world, the Leptotherium found in the caves of Brazil, the Merciotherium from the icy regions of Siberia. Farther on, the Pachydermathus lophian, a giant tapir, hides behind the rocks ready to fight for its prey with the Apotherium, a strange animal that resembles a rhinoceros, horse, and the hippopotamus and camel, as though the creator, in too much of a hurry in the first hours of the world, had just combined several animals into one. A giant mastodon curls his trunk and smashes rocks on the shore with his tusk, while the Megatherium, resting on its enormous paws, digs through the soil and roars, echoing off the granite rocks. Higher up, the Protopipthus, the very first monkey that appeared on the globe, climbs the summits, and even higher, the pterodactyl, with its winged hand, glides on the air like a large bat. And then, of course, in the uppermost layers, finally, immense birds, more powerful than the cassowary and larger than an ostrich, spread vast wings and are about to strike their heads against the granite roof. All of this fossil world is born again in my imagination. I travel back to the biblical age of the world long before the advent of men, when the unfinished world was as yet insufficient to sustain him. My dream then goes back even further to the ages before the advent of any living beings. The mammals disappear, and then the birds, and then the reptiles of the secondary period, and finally the fish, crustacean, and mollusks, and articulated beings. The zoophytes of the transition period also disappeared in nothingness. All of the world's life is concentrated in me, and my heart is the only one that beats in this depopulated globe. There are no seasons, climates are no more. The heat of the globe continually increases and neutralizes that of the radiant star. Vegetation grows excessively, and I glide like a ghost among ferns, treading with unsteady feet the iridescent clay and multicolored sand. I lean then against the trunks of immense conifers and lie in the shade of sphendophilia, astrophilia, and lycopods 100 feet tall. Centuries glide by like days, and I move back through the series of terrestrial transformation. Plants disappear, granite rocks lose their purity, solids give way to liquids under the impact of increasing heat. Water covers the surface of the globe, and it boils and evaporates. Steam envelops the earth, which gradually dissolves into gaseous mass, white hot, and it's as big and radiant as the sun. In the midst of this nebula, 1,400,000 times more voluminous than this globe that will one day become, I am then carried into planetary spaces. My body subtilizes, sublimates itself in turn, and, like an imponderable atom, mingles with these immense vapors that follow their flaming orbits through space. What a dream! Where's it carrying me? My feverish hand sketches the strange details out on paper. I've forgotten everything. The professor, the guide, the raft. A hallucination is possessing my spirit. "What's the matter?" says my uncle. My eyes, wide open, gaze without seeing him. "Take care, Axel, or you'll fall overboard." At the same moment, I feel the vigorous grip of Hans's hand. Without him, I would have thrown myself into the sea under the influence of my hallucination. "Is he going crazy?" says the professor. "What's going on?" I finally said, returning to my own mind. "Are you sick?" says my uncle. "No. I had a momentary hallucination, but it's over now. Is everything okay?" "Yes. Good wind, beautiful sea. We're making good progress, and if I'm not wrong with my calculations, we should soon land." At these words, I rise up and look at the horizon, but the waterline still blurs into a line of clouds. And that is the end of chapter 32. Gonna grab a drink and we'll do one more. That's better. So, they are definitely having quite the time sailing the ocean. I was going to say ocean blue, but would the ocean be blue if it wasn't exposed to the actual atmosphere? I wonder what color this ocean is. I don't think it's been mentioned. But it does seem like Axel, at least, is prone to fits of fancy, like taking a tour through the cosmos in his own mind. Also, I do feel better that there are at least fish, but if they don't figure out where land is, they'll probably run out of water again, which always seems to be their biggest downfall. But I guess we'll figure it all out as we jump back into chapter 33 of Journey to the Center of the Earth. by Jules Verne. Saturday, August 15th. The sea remains monotonously uniform. No land is in sight. The horizon seems excessively far away. My head is still weighed down by the vividness of my dream, but my uncle has had no dreams. He's in a bad mood. He examines all of the directions with his telescope and he folds his arms with a vexed look. I notice that Professor Lindenbrock is becoming the impatient man of the past again, and I note this in my log. It took my danger and suffering to strike a spark of human feeling in him, but now that I'm cured, his nature has once again gained the upper hand. But why lose your temper? Is not the journey progressing under the most favorable circumstances? Isn't the raft gliding with marvelous speed? You seem anxious, Uncle, I say, seeing him lift the telescope frequently to his eye. Anxious? No. Impatient? There is reason to be. But we're going very fast. What does that matter? It's not the speed that's too slow, it's the ocean that's too large. I then remember that the professor, before we departed, had estimated the width of this underground ocean to be 30 leagues. Now we've already covered 3 times this distance, and still no coastline has emerged. We're not going down, said the professor. All this is a waste of time, and after all, I have not come this far to take a little boat trip on a pond. He calls this passage a boat trip. He calls this ocean a pond. But, I tell him, since we followed the route that Sakmussen indicated, that's exactly the question. Have we followed that route? Did Sakmussen find this expanse of water and cross it? Hasn't this stream that we took as our guide led us astray? Well, at any rate, Uncle, we can't regret having come this far. The spectacle is magnificent, and this is not about seeing spectacles. I set myself an objective, and I want to obtain it. So don't you talk to me about admiring spectacles. I take his point, and I let the professor gnaw at his lips with impatience. At 6 p.m, Hans asks for his wages, and his 3 Rix-dollars are counted out to him. Sunday, August 16th. Nothing new. Weather unchanged. The wind is becoming a bit colder. When I wake, my first concern is to determine the intensity of the light. I always fear that the electric phenomenon might grow dim and disappear, but nothing of the sort. The shadow of the raft is clearly outlined on the surface of the waves. Really, this ocean is unending. It must be as large as the Mediterranean or even the Atlantic. Why not? My uncle probes the depths several times. He ties the heaviest of our pickaxes to a long rope, which he then lets run down to 200 fathoms. There's no bottom. We have a lot of difficulty in bringing our probe back up. But when the pickaxe is back on board, Hans points out to me 2 deep imprints on its surface. It looks as if this piece of iron had been vigorously gripped between 2 hard objects. I look at Hans. Thunder, he says. I don't understand. I turn to my uncle, who is completely absorbed in reflection. I don't bother to disturb him. I return to the Icelander. Opening and closing his mouth a few times, he makes me understand his idea. Teeth? I say, examining the iron bar a bit more attentively. Yes, those are indeed teeth marks imprinted on the metal. The jaws that are equipped with these teeth must have prodigious strength. Is it a monster of some long-lost species that moves around in the depths of the water, more voracious than a shark, more formidable than a whale? I can't take my eyes off this half-gnawed bar. Will my dream of last night turn into a reality? These thoughts trouble me all day, and my imagination hardly calms down during a few hours of sleep. Monday, August 17th. I try to recall the particular instincts of those prehistoric animals in the secondary period that succeeded the mollusks, crustaceans, and fish, but preceded the appearance of mammals. Back then, the world belonged to reptiles. Those monsters ruled as masters over the Jurassic Ocean. Nature had bestowed upon them perfect structure. What a gigantic framework! What prodigious strength! The saurians of our day, alligators and crocodiles, are just weaker, smaller reproductions of their forefathers from the primitive age. I shudder as I imagine those monsters. No human eye has ever seen them alive. They appeared on this earth 1,000 ages before man, but their fossil remains, found in alligaceous limestone called lias by the English, have made it possible to reconstruct their anatomy and to discover their huge frames. At the Hamburg Museum, I saw the skeleton of one of these saurians that measured 30 feet in length. Am I destined, me, an inhabitant of Earth, to find myself face to face with these representatives of a prehistoric family? No, it's impossible. Yet the mark of powerful teeth is engraved on the iron bar, and by their imprint, I realize they're cone-shaped like a crocodile. My eyes turn to the sea with dread. I fear seeing one of these inhabitants of the submarine caverns rushing out. I do assume that Professor Lindenbrock shares my thoughts, if not my fears, for after having examined the pickaxe, his eyes roamed across the ocean. To hell with that idea of sounding depth, I say to myself. He probably disturbed some animal in its shelter, and if we're not attacked... I look over at our weapons and make sure that they're in good shape. My uncle notices and approves with a nod. Already, big commotions at the surface of the water point to an upheaval in the deeper layers. Danger is near. We must be vigilant. Thursday, August 18th. Evening comes, or rather the time when sleep weighs down our eyelids, for this ocean knows no night, and the relentless light tires out our eyes continually, as if we're sailing under an Arctic sun. Hans is at the helm, and during his watch I fall asleep. 2 hours later, a jolt wakes me up. The raft has been lifted up outside of the water with an indescribable force and thrown 20 fathoms. "What's the matter?" shouts my uncle. "Have we struck land?" Hans points with his finger at a blackish mass 200 fathoms away, which rises and falls again and again. I look and say, "It's an enormous porpoise." "Yes," says my uncle, "and now there is a sea lizard of extraordinary size." "Farther on, look, a monstrous crocodile. Look at its huge jaw and its rows of teeth. It's disappearing." "A whale! Look, a whale!" says the professor. "I can see its fins. Look at the air and water it blows out through its blowhole." Indeed, 2 water columns rise up to considerable height above the sea. We stand there, surprised, thunderstruck, frightened at the presence of this herd of marine monsters. They're supernaturally sized. The smallest among them could break our raft with one snap of its teeth. Hans indicates that he wants to tack before the wind to get away from this dangerous neighborhood, but he discovers no less fearsome enemies on the other side. A 40-foot turtle and a 30-foot snake that shoots its head up above the water. It's impossible to get away. The reptiles approach and wheel around our little raft at a speed that express trains couldn't match. They swim in concentric circles around it. I have my rifle, but what can a bullet do against scales that cover the bodies of these animals? We're utterly speechless with fear. They come closer. On one side, the crocodile, and on the other, the snake. The rest of the marine herd seems to have disappeared. I get ready to fire, but Hans stops me with a gesture. The two monsters pass within 50 fathoms of the raft and hurl themselves at each other with a fury that prevents them from even seeing us. Their battle is fought 100 fathoms away from the raft. We can see these two monsters in mortal combat. But now it seems to me as if the other animals were participating in the battle. The porpoise, the whale, the lizard, the turtle. Every instant I catch sight of one of them. I point them out to Hans, and he shakes his head negatively. "Tava," he says. What? Two? He claims only two animals? He's right, says my uncle, whose telescope has never left his eyes. It can't be. Yes, he says. One of these monsters has the snout of a porpoise, the head of a lizard, the teeth of a crocodile. That's what's deceived us. It is the most formidable of the prehistoric reptiles, the ichthyosaurus. And the other? The other one is a snake hidden in the shell of a turtle, a plesiosaurus, the terrible enemy of the first. Hans speaks the truth. There are only two monsters on the surface of the ocean, and I have two reptiles of the primitive oceans swimming in front of my eyes. I can distinguish the bloody eye of the ichthyosaurus, as big as a man's head. Nature has endowed it with an extremely powerful optical device that can withstand the water pressure at the depths that it inhabits. It has rightfully been called a saurian whale because it has the latter's speed and size. This one is no less than 100 feet long, and I can judge its size when it raises the vertical fins on its tail above the water. Its jaw is enormous, and according to the naturalists, it has no less than 182 teeth. The plesiosaurus, a snake with a cylindrical body and a short tail, has 4 paws shaped like oars. Its entire body is covered by a shell, and its neck, flexible as a swan's, rises 30 feet above the waves. These animals are attacking each other with indescribable rage. They heave up liquid mountains that roll back to our craft. 20 times we're about to capsize. Loud hissing can be heard. The beasts are locked together. I can't tell one from the other. We must fear the fury of whichever one wins. 1, 2 hours pass. The struggle continues with the same ferocity. The combatants alternatively move to and away from our raft, and we remain motionless, ready to fire. Suddenly, the ichthyosaurus and the plesiosaurus disappear, creating a genuine maelstrom in the water. Minutes passed. Will their battle end in the depths of the ocean? Suddenly, an enormous head shoots up, the head of the plesiosaurus. It's fatally injured. I no longer see its enormous shell. Just its long neck shoots up, drops, rises again, droops, lashes through the water like a giant whip, and writhes like a worm split in two. The water splashes a considerable distance and blinds us, but soon the reptile's agony draws to an end. Its movements diminish, its contortions decrease, and the long serpentine shape extends like a lifeless mass on the calm again water. As for the ichthyosaur, did he return to his submarine cavern, or is he going to reappear on the surface of the ocean to hunt us? And that is the end of the chapter. But we do have an illustration of the ichthyosaur and the plesiosaur right there, locked in mortal combat. I knew it. I knew we were going to see some wildlife at some point. All right, so again, going by the science of Jules Verne's time, this was probably a highly scientific book. Looking at it from our perspective, it's kind of fun, but very, very silly. And you know what? That's something I'm enjoying quite a bit about it. I did look and see that this has been adapted into several movies. I don't know if any of them are in the public domain, but I will do some checking on that. The very first movie that was made from this book was a French film, and according to what I read, no copies of it remain, which is kind of a tragedy, because I would like to see that very first film adaptation of this. There were a couple more adaptations that probably are in the public domain, if there are any copies of them left. And then the first, like, big one was made sometime back in the 50s. And from what I was reading, it actually, instead of Hans coming along, has a girl coming along. So maybe the film version of Grauben. I guess they wanted to make it a little bit more dramatic, and who can blame them? Although this is already very, very dramatic. I'm enjoying it a great deal. So thank you, as always, for listening. Please leave a thumbs up if you don't mind, and I'll see you tomorrow.